already feel the enthusiasm in the air, and I look forward to see more progress in the future. So my talk is about nanobiomimetics, materials for the future. And you would ask yourself maybe why? Well, the answer for that is, I'd say, quite simple. 200 years or 300 years of modern chemistry in the Industrial Revolution resulted with, as you can see, not so successful structures like crushed airplanes, polluting trucks, while 2 to 3 billion years of evolution around us resulted with some remarkable structures with remarkable performance. It would be very nice if we could take a look how things are done in nature and harness these wonderful materials and structures to our use. We use a lot of synthetic materials in medical implants, which we screw and we glue into our body. Now, that's probably not such a great idea. And the reason is these materials tend to fail. Sometimes they fail like this plastic fork. Sometimes they fail because to take my head and screw it into my neck, and there is no one there that takes the skin and glue it on my body. In nature, whether it's animal or plant or insect, everything starts with the cells that contain a DNA. And the DNA encodes for the building blocks, these nanobio building blocks. Many times there are proteins, sometimes there are enzymes that make other materials like polysaccharides, fatty acids, whatever. And one of the nice things about these nanobio building blocks is that they have the ability to self-assemble. They recognize each other and self-assemble themselves to beautiful structures on which the cells are growing, proliferating into tissues, and from that to organs and to living creatures. Now, we at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem decided to focus on probably the most important nanobio building block of everybody in this audience, which is collagen. Now, why collagen? Collagen is a protein that actually accounts for about 25% of our dry weight. There is nothing more than collagen in our body except for water. Just to give you a few examples, bone, 50% collagen, 50% mineral. Our skin is about 70% collagen. Tendons and ligaments, close to 100% collagen. So I like to say that anyone who is in the business of replacement parts for human beings would like to have collagen. And in fact, already 10 years ago, before we even started our project, there were already more than 1,000 medical implants that are made of collagen. You know, simple things like you see on the right-hand side of the screen at the top, like dermal fillers to reduce wrinkles and augment lips. More serious products, like you see on the left bottom, which is artificial meniscus, or bone void implants, and even artificial heart valves, all made of collagen. In fact, today, 10 years later, there are more than 3,000 medical implants. But as I told you, it was there already before we started. So, where is it for us? Well, here's the problem. All that collagen that in fact make all these implants is extracted from dead tissues. It is extracted from pigs, from cows, and even from human cadaver. And that's a very big there is a big safety issue here, because they all contain human pathogens. It could be viruses, prions like mad cow disease, and so on and so forth. And in fact, the FDA already in 2007 already realized that there is such a problem, and it approached all the companies asking them to start and look for a better and safer alternative. And in fact, there are better and safer alternatives. I can give you an example: insulin. Years ago, we used to extract insulin from the pancreas of pigs. And by the way, just to have one diabetic patient for 1 year with a constant supply of insulin, we used to kill anywhere between 100 and 150 pigs. Today, using modern technology like genetic engineering, we've been able to clone the human gene that encodes for insulin, introduce it into yeast, the same yeast that we make beer or wine or bread, and now we grow the yeast in big fermenters and extract pure and safe insulin, which can be supplied in a cost-effective manner to the patients. So the technology is there. So why not do the same with collagen? Well, here's the problem. Much more difficult. Because insulin, for example, or other proteins like erythropoietin, it's a single gene that encodes for a single protein. While collagen is much more difficult. In order to make collagen, it requires the concerted effort of 5 human genes. Now, 10 years ago, if you would go to a scientist in the pharmaceutical company or the university and tell him, why don't you take 5 human genes, introduce them into a single host like yeast, and express those genes there and make collagen, he would look probably at you as you're crazy. And the reason for that is that in order to optimize each one of the genes, it requires anywhere between 5,000 to 10,000 transformation events, which are independent. So now do the calculation. If you have 5 genes, and the chance to have optimum is 1 out of 5,000, so it's 1 to 5,000 times 1 to 5,000 to 1 to 5,000 5 times. So the chance to succeed is probably lower than to win the lottery. So no one would do it. Well, we thought differently. We decided to take advantage of plants. And why is that? Because in plants, unlike in yeast, for example, what you could do is the following. You could simply take different plants and try and optimize in each one of them each of the different genes. And then once you have optimized, then all you have to do is to wait until the plant is flowering. They then take a pollen from one and put it on the pistil, the flower of the other one, and make a cross. And now all you have to do is wait until you have a fruit, and you take the seeds, you go over the plant, and all of a sudden you have the 2 genes from the 2 parents in one plant. And by doing this trick, we've been able to introduce all the 5 human genes that are responsible for making type 1 collagen in human into a single transgenic tobacco plant. The technology actually was further developed and actually took off, and today it's a company in Israel already traded in the Israeli Stock Exchange. We have in Israel today 25,000 square meters of greenhouses all over the country, from the northern part of Israel, in the middle, in the south, even in the Jordan Valley recently, where the farmers receive from the company small plantlets of tobacco, the same tobacco that we smoke, except that in these tobacco plants we have 5 human genes that are responsible for making type 1 collagen. So the farmers grow these plants for anywhere between 50 to 70 days, after which they harvest the leaves. The leaves are transported by cooling trucks to the factory, and from there we extract the collagen. If you've ever seen a pesto factory, that's exactly how it looks like. You know, not so different. Take the leaves are going into a big mixer, you know, crushed with some buffer. We squeeze the juice that contains the protein, concentrate it. In the factory we call it the white pellet. In fact, it looks more like a green ice cream. And this green ice cream is then transported to another factory with clean rooms where we purify, from which 100% pure type 1 collagen, identical to what we have in our body. And from that, we actually make all the different medical implants that you see, and I will talk about more of them today afternoon while I present whole plant. But just for the sake of those that are interested, this is just one that we are now developing together with Pfizer Bioventus, which is an American company. And this is a bone void filler. When do we need a bone void filler? Many times. For example, when we do a spinal fusion, or in traumatic accidents, where, for example, the surgeon tries to join 2 bones, but because of the accident, he doesn't have much to work with. Or when we have a bone cancer and we have to remove part of the bone. So in that case, we need to fill the gap. So what this product is all about, it's a human recombinant type 1 collagen produced from the tobacco that is structured in a form of a cube, together with some hydroxyapatite, which is the mineral that we have in our body. The doctor simply put on that liquid that contains some growth factor produced by Pfizer, which is called BMP2. And what happened is that the material all of a sudden starts to feel like Play-Doh. So he can sculpture actually the part of the bone that is missing. And what happened is that the cells, the stem cells from the bone marrow, actually attach to the collagen, which is their natural scaffold. And they get the signal to grow. So they start to grow and proliferate and fill the gap. And the BMP2 send them signal, guys, you are in a region where we need bone. So these cells are now transformed or differentiated into osteoblasts, which actually makes bone. And anywhere between 6 to 8 weeks, they have a perfect bone. In fact, it's better bone than that was there before. We actually completed now preclinical trials in non-human primates, and hopefully by the end of this week we'll be in clinical trials. The company already have one product for diabetic foot ulcer, a CE mark in Europe. We have 2 other products, one for tendon repair and another one for diabetic foot ulcer, which I'll talk about today afternoon. But I'd like to move to another extremely fascinating material, which we've been working with for some time in my lab at the university. If you look at these Sequoia trees, and you must be amazed to understand that these trees carry hundreds of tons over hundreds of years in the rain, in the sun, in UV light. There's absolutely no plastic material that can do that job. They are really remarkable. Now, if you look at the structure and then just ask yourself, what is it made of? And you go deep into the structure, you'll be astonished to find out that it's actually a material made of sugar. It's the same sugar that we put in our tea. Well, not that simple. It's actually a polymer of that sugar called cellulose. Well, not even that simple. It's actually a very, very crystalline form of cellulose, which is called nanocrystalline cellulose. This particular material is actually at a size of about 400 nanometer in length. It's about 5 to 10 nanometer in width. And it is so strong, it is 10 times stronger than steel. And yet, it's sugar. And it's renewable. Well, about 7 years ago, we joined a European consortium that aimed to start and look for ways to extract in a cost-effective way this nanocellulose. And there are several reasons for that. Well, one reason is that economists believe that two compounds, graphene and nanocellulose, are going to be the most important materials for the industry after 2020. So that's a good reason. In addition to that, it's the most abundant biomaterial on Earth. There is nothing more than cellulose on Earth, and it's there. Yet, if you open the internet and go to Google, go to Alibaba, you won't be able to find it. You can't buy it. And there is reason for that, because first of all, there's only one company in Canada that developed it commercially, but they now they just started to work at the industrial scale, and they supplied only to a few companies that were in the consortium that actually created that company, because they tried to have edge over others. And the other reason is that it's relatively expensive material. Because think about how much energy and chemistry you have to invest to isolate this nanofiber from this plant. You have to get rid of all the extractives, all the lignin and the chemicals, the proteins, the fatty acids, whatever. You have to remove all the amorphous parts of the cellulose, and you have to purify that nanocellulose. So we thought, well, that's a lot of work. Did anyone in the world at least did part of the work for us? And the answer is yes. It's the paper industry. In fact, they log the trees, they cut the trees, they extract, they purify the cellulose, and they make paper. Now, if you know how paper is made, and interestingly enough, it didn't change much in the last 2,000 years, the process, you take these cellulose fibers, you mix it with a lot of water, and you throw it on a running, forming fabric. What happens is that the fibers are laid on the fabric, collected at the end, the water flows through. Now, today, because more and more we use recycled fibers, these water that flow through contain a lot of tiny cellulose fibers that are not big enough to be collected on the forming fabric. And that ends up as a sludge. It's a big problem. Europe alone produces 11 million tons of that paper sludge annually. It costs them €150 to just dispose it from the site. And for us, it's the perfect source, because it's already pure, it's already tiny. All we need to do is to continue a little bit more the process and to extract from that the nanocellulose. So that's exactly what we're doing, and in fact we created or established another company called Melodia. Melodia is actually an Israeli company partnered with Holman. Holman is a very large forestry, pulp and paper company in Sweden. They invested in the Israeli company, and we sit together in the board of directors. And as you can see from that sludge, we produce nanocellulose at extremely high efficiency, 25% recovery. So that's quite a lot. So we start with 1 ton of sludge, and that costs them at the moment 150 euro to dispose. So they are ready to pay us that money, okay, for the raw material. And we end up with 250 kilograms of nanocellulose. So just to give you a feel for how much this nanocellulose is worth, 1 ton of pulp, or let's talk about kilogram. 1 kilogram of pulp or paper is about $30 cents to maybe up to $1. Nanocellulose today worth, depend on the application and the purity, is anywhere between 200 to 300 US dollars per kilogram. So in fact, the waste worth much more than the product. So we've been able to scale up the process, and today we're working already at 2 kilogram scale. This summer, actually, we will establish the first a small factory in Sweden that will start with 100 kilograms per day up to 1 ton per day. So what are we doing with that? Lots of things. But this is just one example. In Melodia, we've been able to develop a method to make nanocellulose foam. It's a very simple method by which we take the solution of the nanocellulose, which is nanocellulose in water, and we just pour it into a mold and we freeze it. So what happened is that the water crystals are forming, and the nanocellulose is then concentrated, pushed against each other, and self-assemble to a remarkable, as you can see here, remarkable structure. And then all the thing you have to do is remove the water, and you end up with a structural foam. It is 100% made of nanocellulose. This material, of course, can replace a lot of foams that are made from oil, like polystyrene, expanded PVC, and so on. And there are a lot of applications into transportation, in the aviation industry, construction, and so on for such materials. But this is not the only thing, because nanocellulose, unlike wood, which is opaque, because it is highly pure and crystalline, it is transparent. And if you just take the nanocellulose solution and you apply it on a surface and you let the water just dry, they self-assemble to very, very strong film. Just to give you the feel how much strong this film is, it's about 100 megapascal, which is 2 times stronger than epoxy glue. And there is no covalent bond there, so it's no chemical covalent bonding, it's simply self-assembly. So the applications for such material are enormous. And we've been able to modify so it will be suitable for 3D printing. You were talking about 3D printing. And 3D printing will require a lot of materials, not just to make small models, but actually to build houses. And today, people are already starting to not just think, but to actually apply it. In addition to that, the nanocellulose has two remarkable features. Because it's self-assembled into such a nice structure, it's a perfect gas barrier. So oxygen doesn't flow through. So that's one thing. In addition to that, because of these beautiful layers that you can see by the high resolution and electron microscopy, the gaps between the nanofibers is in the range of about 5 to 20 nanometer. So they trap wonderfully other nanoparticles which can be used to functionalize these beautiful films. So we established another company called Valentis. This is in one of the Israeli incubators. And Valentis are actually developing applications for films made of nanocellulose and nanoparticles. So what you see here on the left-hand side is a demonstration of high gas barrier properties, increased strength, and adjustable UV or infrared barrier properties. For example, at the top, by including zinc oxide nanoparticles, all of a sudden we cut the UV part. So we have now a transparent film that doesn't let oxygen pass through, but also block the UV. So that's perfect for food packaging. At the bottom part, you can see that by selecting a different nanoparticle, which in this case is a silicon oxide nanoparticle, essentially sand that is at the nano size, we effectively block the infrared. So why do we want to block the infrared? In greenhouses, as you know, we can use two kind of materials. Either glass, which is heavy, brittle, and expensive, need very strong construction, or polyethylene, for example. The good thing about polyethylene is that it is light, it's inexpensive, but the problem is that it is transparent to infrared, unlike glass. And so what happens that at night, after we accumulated the heat in the greenhouse, all the heat is lost by radiation through the polyethylene. So here, by making a coat of this nanocellulose on polyethylene, and this coat is only 500 nanometers, so it's extremely thin, we've been able to do the following. Increase the strength of the polyethylene by about 30 to 40%. We've made it now, we made an excellent barrier for infrared by this nanoparticles. So we have now a plastic film with glass properties. So the applications are, as you can see, are quite enormous because the market now is moving for advanced materials in the packaging area. There is a big trend to move from rigid to flexible packaging. And the industry are seeking for materials that are thinner, lighter, stronger, and greener. The need is for gas and UV barrier. And this kind of packaging can supply the demand. We're really talking about huge markets. Flexible food packaging is about $110 billion was in 2012. European agricultural film demand is about $2.7 billion. So really looking at big markets. So now I'd like to move to another creature that attracted my attention about 9 years ago in the lab. And as funny as it seems, this is a cat flea. Now why cat fleas? Well, cat fleas are wonderful creatures. They have the ability to jump as high as 200 times their height. This is amazing because It's the equivalent of a person standing in the middle of Manhattan and in a single jump go to the top of the Empire State Building. So that's great. I mean, it would be wonderful if we had that ability. So how these insects been able to develop that skill? Well, they make a very beautiful material which is called resin. It's a protein which, in simple words, it's the perfect rubber on earth. This material, you can stretch it, you can actually press it, and it doesn't lose any energy to the environment by heat or friction. It stores everything. And when you release it, boom, it brings back everything. So that's wonderful. And so that's exactly how cat fleas jump so high. Because they make this resin cushion under the leg, they press it, and when they want, they release it, boom, and they fly so high. So it would be great if we could have this material. But to catch cat fleas is difficult. They're jumping. I don't know if you tried that once, but it's very difficult to do that. But if you caught few, don't be so happy because you don't have much material. It is not tiny. So what can you do with that? But this is the beauty of nano biomimetics. If you caught only one, we can now extract its DNA, read the code, take the gene, and introduce it to a less jumpy creature, like plant, for example. So that's exactly what we did. And today we've been able to make recombinant resin. In fact, we didn't even do that because it was impossible for us to catch cat fleas. I asked my students for 1 month to find a cat flea. And they promised, I even promised a reward. No one. But then I realized that the same gene is found also in Drosophila, which is a fruit fly. And that was much easier because all I had to do is to cross the other side of the corridor to another lab that was working on Drosophila genetics, open one of the jars, take one of these Drosophila, extract the DNA, and make the gene. Now, it's actually more complicated because in nature, the insect, cat flea, make this material as a composite. It's a composite of a protein and another fiber made of another kind of sugar called chitin. Now, we don't like to work with chitin, we like to work with nanocellulose because we have it already and it's much better. So what we've done, as you can see here on the graph, what we've done, we simply took the part of the gene of the original resin that has the chitin binding domain, and by genetic engineering replaced it with a cellulose binding domain. So now we have a new protein that has the ability to make the composite with nanocellulose. So now I'm going to show you a short video to see how dramatic is the effect of a little bit of resin on a nanocellulose foam. So we created a small foam which is made of nanocellulose. You can see it on the left-hand side. And then we tested its mechanical properties. We'll show you in a second. And in addition to that, we made exactly the same thing, but we added a little bit of resin into that. So look at that effect. So you see, on the right-hand side, we crash it, the nanocellulose. Well, it's plastic. There is no elasticity to it. But look what happened at the left. That's the same one with a little bit of resin. By the way, I find it interesting. Every time when I get to this point, everybody is smiling. Probably reminds us something from our childhood, that we would play with something jumpy. But anyway, so this is great. So the question is, what can we do with that? Well, this is one thing. And in fact, we are now working with a Swiss company called On Runners. It's a company that actually makes specialty shoes for athletes that would like to have more advanced performance. In fact, my dream is to be able to dunk above my kids. And that's a big problem because they are 1.90 meters and I'm short. So I'm looking forward to the first shoes. So now imagine what could be great if we could combine the elasticity of the insect kingdom coming from cat fleas with the strength of plant kingdom coming from the nanocellulose. We could definitely make wonderful materials, and this is just one example. If you now take nanocellulose and make a film, just pure nanocellulose, you get this transparent film that, as you can see from the top two pictures, it has no elasticity. But if you now add a little bit of resin to that, now all of a sudden you make a film that has all the nanocellulose properties, but in addition, it's now extremely flexible. In fact, the mechanical properties resulted from this combination are superior to the nanocellulose by itself. In fact, here there is a very interesting phenomenon. Typically, when you take a stiff material and you add an elastomer, you expect that the stiffness will go low. Of course, it will be more elastic, and then you expect that the toughness or the energy to break will be higher. But in this case, actually, what we achieved is something much more superior. As you can see from the yellow or the orange curve on the top, that we've been able to make a material that is stiffer and more elastic. So by doing, I don't have the time now to get into the mechanics of that. We published a very interesting paper on that recently. If anyone is interested, I'll be more than happy to send you the paper. But it's quite remarkable because by doing that, we now have a stiffer material, more elastic, with more than double the toughness. In other words, energy to break. And that's remarkable because there are lots of things we could do. I mean, how many of us already lost their touchscreen of our iPhone or smartphone because it was broken? I believe at least, that in the future, near future, we'll be able to introduce these materials to make touchscreens, because we can introduce nanoparticles that are conductive. And there are a lot of interesting applications for those wonderful natural biomaterials. You see, today we limit ourselves when we build our houses because we make them top to bottom. And these top to bottom fabrications limit ourselves because they're limited by the macrostructures that were produced, for example, by the trees. But once we have these nanofibers that can self-assemble, now we can introduce into that modern systems of 3D printing. You can start thinking of making houses. You can make structures that can enjoy the mechanical properties of all these insects, of all these kingdoms. The insect kingdom that will give us the elasticity, the plant kingdom that will give us the stiffness, and of course, the sea kingdom, which has a lot to learn for the future. Thank you.
But what you will get is a lot of people wanting agencies and dealerships. I've been with over a cup of scotch today. Don't say yes to anyone. We need to negotiate. Now, jokes aside, this is phenomenal stuff, right? And I'm going to take the liberty of saying, I don't think there is anybody in India that is bringing you this kind of content. iCreate is doing it. Minister, now Prime Minister, told us when first we wanted to create IPA, he said we must partner with the Israelis. And the reason is per capita, they have the largest amount of entrepreneurs in the world, greater than the US, per capita. And that's from sheer out of necessity. I mean, I'm very impressed with that, but I'd be more impressed if you figured out how to smoke that tobacco leaf and your bone just creates itself. You can do a whole process there.
That would be our startup.
Make a cigarette out of the tobacco, let's smoke it, but bone is there. But anyway, this presentation has given us insight into we have to think outside the box, outside the norm. He started with plants and animals and how you can recreate everything from manufacturing. That's very powerful. Each one of you should start thinking along the lines. So that, thank you so much. More importantly, Harry, this is huge. I got to tell you, I mean, this is a diamond in the rough. Unbelievable. Just like I have a word of thanks. Can you please have a word of thanks and thank them? Please.
Guys, you embarrass me.
By the way,
It was no part of the deal.
I was dumbfounded, but do we have questions? I mean, we have, so, sorry, we do have a couple of questions. And we have a lady here, go ahead. Introduce yourself, please.
I'm Kiran Vidam, I'm from IIT Gandhinagar. I try to help our entrepreneurs on campus build their company. So I want to ask you, how did your university support you, and what can we learn from it as we help our academics commercialize technology?
Where is Sudhir when we need him? So you can hear him speak.
Well, in Israel, as I'm sure Harry has much more knowledge about it because he has the bigger picture. I have my,
No, I want an academic's view, not. I mean, we are professionals, but you're an academic, so your view would be very valuable.
Well, he's also an academic, but anyway, I will respond. I would say at the Hebrew University, we have a technology transfer office, which is called ISUM. University, as you know, is a non-profit organization. Although they like to get some profit, we were talking about this morning, but that's a different business. And in ISUM, we have such a system that actually encourage the scientists to do two things. First of all, when you have an idea or scientific breakthrough, before you go first and tell your friends by publishing the paper in scientific conferences or in the journals, just go and file for patent. So that's the first thing. And that we have there group of professionals that once we submit them the idea or the paper, they will look into that and say, well, we believe that there is a potential, and then therefore they're going to invest in filing the patent, or yes or no. So that's the first thing. In addition to that, the scientist itself and also the students that work in the project can share from the profit. Typically, 40% goes to the university from royalties or from equity, whatever comes from that. Down payments. 40% or 20% goes to the scientist as a research grant to continue to do some work, and 40% goes to the pocket of the inventors. Typically, and what I do is I share it equally with my students. So some of my students have now nice houses, and so they made that. So that's why my lab is so popular. They smoke cigars. No, just kidding. But I think that it's an incentive. It's an incentive, and everybody enjoy that because the students see that something can come out from their scientific work. They can personally benefit from them, and of course the society.
Oh my God. There's a limit as well, so the gentleman over there. Yep.
This is Praveen Kulkarni from KK. Whether your university or other universities in Israel, what is the latest status of having developed solar cells or without silicon, with higher efficiencies? Any alternate material or nano technology? What's the latest?
Some quite advanced work in that. You're welcome to write me an email and put you in contact with one of them from the Nano Center at the Hebrew University, and also there is one at the Biomimetics University. I cannot tell you if we're doing better than anybody else or not, because this is not exactly my field, but I know that there is a lot of interest in non-silicon light harvesting systems.
Genomes in cat flies that you were searching for, but you couldn't catch the cat flies, and then you got another insect. But without catching that, how did you know that these two insects has this, I'm saying, similar property?
Okay. So it's actually the protein itself, the amino acid sequence of the protein was determined already in the 70s. But the gene was not identified. But we knew what is the amino acid sequence. So now, when you have in the genome database the genome of Drosophila, you could see that it's the same gene. Okay, so that was the reason for that.
Hi. Morning. This is Priyam Parikh. I've been working as a head of the department Mechatronics Engineering in SAR Technical Campus. So basically, we have been working with Arduino board. You might be knowing about Arduino, the microcontroller Arduino board, because we have developed a 3D printer with the help of Arduino. We have got 2 or 3 different kind of models, but we are just producing small nuts and bolts and kind of things.
Question? Let's get to the question.
So we want to basically work on the skin system, something beyond that in 3D printing. So how could our university can contact you, or me myself, as a research scholar can contact you? Please guide me. Thank you.
A beautiful country. I have a different question than technology. I studied at IIT Bombay, and there were a lot of great professors and scientists over there. They have great ideas, but unfortunately here in India there are a lot of naysayers. So if I even discovered that there is this property with that firefly, and that can be applied to shoes, and a human can jump up to even 10 meters or something like that, a lot of folks would laugh at me, or they would say he's just a mad scientist. You might have faced similar issues in the past at your university, where people just said that's not possible, or you have lost your mind. How did you overcome that? How did you overcome basically that hurdle with the peers, and most importantly with the investors who have money? Because at times the investors are not familiar with those technology terms, or they just don't want to believe that because they have seen a lot of failures. Thank you.
Simple. Determination. Determination and the will to dare. You will, everywhere in the world, including Israel, you will have always people that will laugh at you and they will think that you're doing silly things. But I tell you something, I think that great ideas come from what seems to be a silly idea. And in fact, I have in my group, many times when we sit together, I ask everybody to throw the most crazy idea, and we laugh at, we're laughing and we're making it a non-official meeting. And that's a way that we are used to that. So if somebody is laughing, let him laugh. Do whatever you think is right and go after your target. And you'll get it.
I can add something there. Look, one way we deal with this stuff in Israel is that we learn how to laugh. So make jokes about ourselves is good for us, and is good for going over it. So adopt the same attitude if you like. I will see more happy faces here in the room. I think that will contribute to the ecosystem as well. So start laughing, guys. Now, I shall thank Oded, and he said what is going to be embarrassing, and I agree because it's going to be embarrassing for me as well, because I know indeed Oded is very top world-class ranked scientist and entrepreneur as well, and his time is very difficult to get his attention. But in Israel, we are used to it. I mean, when we discussed about how to manage what next, and I was thinking for one or two figures, worldwide figures that I want to bring here. I just said to my peers, look, I'm going to ask Oded to come. Which is, for me, was quite simple, and when we discussed, he only said, look, I have a problem, I have to be in Bilbao the same week. I don't know how shall I manage it, and I explained, look, Bilbao, you see these scientists, top people, whatever, people who need you are here in India. And he, in fact, was supposed to be in Bilbao. He just canceled his appearance there a few days ago to come here. Between Israel is very simple, and I also suggest that you reduce this social distances in your society if you want to foster entrepreneurship and innovation. In addition, we actually benefited both of us because despite the fact that we know for a while, we didn't see each other face to face for 2 years, and we used last evening to have a couple of hours of updating. We also discussed this, my commitment to India and what we do here, and we both agree that you have here huge resources by so many minds, so many people. There is no reason you cannot, as he extracts collagen and from plants, ideas can be extracted and used the same way as we do in Israel, but at a completely different scale. And the little contribution we can make, because we are not so many, is to bring you this spirit and let you believe that you can do it. And you'll find a way to do it, right? Just get started. So this is my way of thinking of that by explaining the impact that I'm sure we made here. And by the way, Hiran is another friend of mine, and you are going to spend this time. She has